I had concerns that I would be recognized as Muhammad Ali's daughter.
Father and I were so much alike, but we were also very different. And my father and I used to bump heads a lot.
Have you ever seen Muhammad Ali raise his fist high amid millions of cheers? But have you ever wondered, in the darkness after those immortal fights, what he left behind for his own children? Today, in 2026, the world still whispers the name Ali. But for the 9 heirs of the king, that name is both a golden key and a heavy chain. One son once sat trembling in an airport interrogation room, detained simply because his last name was Ali. There was a child who grew up never daring to call him father. And there was someone who spent a lifetime trying to escape that enormous shadow, only to discover that the shadow followed them into every room they entered. But inside the Ali family, fame didn't always bring happiness. While another would eventually step back into the ring and prove the Ali name still carried world-shaking power. That story of the child who became a champion would nearly fracture the family itself, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Today, we lift the veil on the lives of the 9 children of Muhammad Ali. And by the end of this story, you might find yourself asking a difficult question. Was being the child of the greatest boxer in history a privilege or a burden no one could ever choose? Before we dive into the story, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories reach more boxing fans around the world. Now, let's step inside the private world of the Ali family. The story of the heirs begins on a night in May 2016, where a dim yellow light fell across the face of Maryam Ali. She sat alone in a hospital room in Scottsdale, Arizona, watching her father lay motionless as a ventilator gave off a cold, steady rhythm. Maryam was the firstborn, a girl who by age 7 had learned to sit quietly backstage, watching her giant father raise his arms in victory amid a sea of screaming fans, the flashbulbs reflecting in her eyes like miniature suns. But when the match was over, he returned to being a gentle father who whispered, "Don't be afraid, Daddy's here." By 2026, Maryam has walked a path far from the $80 million fortune that once sat on that hospital table. After a brief stint in rap and comedy, careers where the world expected her to match her father's legendary wit and rhythmic tongue, she realized the only thing that made her feel useful was helping others find the peace she sought. Today, she works as a social counselor for youth in Watts, Los Angeles, earning a modest salary of about $50,000 a year. Her personal assets are believed to be under $200,000, a figure that pales in comparison to the millions her father's name generates annually. Yet, she guards a treasure money can't buy, an old wooden box filled with letters her father wrote to her, the handwriting wobbly and fragile from the early tremors of Parkinson's. One letter reads, May, I'm afraid of the day everyone forgets me. If you still remember I was once a good father, that's enough. While Maryam stayed close to the community, her sister Jamillah Ali chose to protect her identity by disappearing entirely into a life of her own making, far from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. Born only 7 minutes apart from her twin sister Rasheda, Jamillah was always the quieter one, the observer who preferred the stillness of a library to the roar of the arena. In 1991, following a tense argument over her independence and religious choices, a clash of wills between a legendary icon and a daughter seeking her own soul, Jamillah packed her clothes and drove away into the night. Today, in her 50s, she remains the most private of the siblings, a philanthropist who avoids cameras and keeps a single scrap of leather from the glove Ali wore to defeat George Foreman as her only memento. Her twin sister, Rasheda, however, chose to become the voice her father eventually lost to his illness. Rasheda is the daughter who turned a legacy into a bond both sacred and heavy, often acting as the family's public face and emotional anchor during the champion's most vulnerable years. In 1995, she placed a letter in her father's trembling hand, promising to keep his image alive for as long as she lived, ensuring the world saw the man behind the myth. In 2026, she has fulfilled that promise as a global advocate for Parkinson's research, traveling the world to speak for those who have been silenced by the same disease. The Ali Lightning has even returned to the ring through her son, Nico Ali Walsh, a professional boxer who fights with his grandfather's unmistakable speed and charisma, carrying the weight of the name on his very trunks. Ali's only biological son, Muhammad Ali Jr., grew up in the hollow space between global glory and personal abandonment. Born in 1972, he spent his childhood seeing his father mostly in photos and on television screens, a distant deity rather than a present parent. He once stood at the door for 5 hours on his 8th birthday, holding a chocolate cake that said, "To my champ," only for Ali to arrive long after midnight, exhausted and gaunt, going straight upstairs without a word, a moment that defined a lifetime of seeking a shadow. In 2026, his life is a stark, sometimes painful contrast to the fame of his name. His highest annual income has often been reported as barely reaching $36,000, and he has spent years navigating the challenges of poverty and a meager allowance from the estate. The weight of the name hit a breaking point in 2017 when he was detained at a Florida airport for 2 hours. The son of a freedom icon treated as a suspect because of his heritage and his name, an irony that cut deep into his spirit. He still holds one priceless treasure, though. The Rolex date just his father wore in his final match in 1981, a ticking reminder of a time when the world was at their feet. The struggle for identity was just as real for the children born outside of Ali's famous marriages, who often had to fight for recognition in a family already crowded by the spotlight. Miya Ali, born in 1972, grew up in California with only a poster of Ali on the wall and 1,000 unanswered questions about her place in his heart. It wasn't until 2005 that she found a brown envelope containing photos of her father and mother looking tenderly at each other, finally confirming that she was a child of love and not just a footnote to history. Today, Miya is a corporate professional in Chicago, finding her worth in her own career and the quiet strength of her mother's memory. Similarly, Khaliah Ali, born in 1974, spent her life proving she didn't need a ring to be a heavyweight in her own right. She became a force in fashion, designing luxury wear for plus-size women and building a career that earns her hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Though her total assets sit around $1 million, she stays grounded in her Philadelphia home, far from the Hollywood glitz that often consumes the heirs of fame. She still gazes at a crude gold nugget her father gave her as a baby, engraved with the words, "Rumble in the jungle." If Khaliah was the designer of the legacy, Hana Ali was its historian and keeper of the flame. Born in 1976, Hana was the child who understood him best, spending her youth recording her father's private thoughts and vulnerable moments on cassette tapes while he sat in his armchair, his voice slowing but his mind still sharp. Today, she is a successful author and broadcaster, using those recordings to humanize the legend and show the world the man who wept over his mistakes. She hosts a radio program every morning about Ali's legacy, but on late nights, she still turns on those old, hissing tapes just to hear him reciting poetry to her when she was 6. She isn't just a keeper of a legend. She is still that child who wished her father would come home early to tell her a bedtime story, finding solace in the digital echoes of his voice. But remember the open loop from earlier? The child who stepped into the ring and nearly fractured the family? That was Laila Ali. Born in 1977, Laila is the only child who followed her father directly into the fire of the ring, a path that was both a tribute and a rebellion. Her decision to box was met with fierce resistance from Ali himself, who feared for his daughter's safety and legacy. She ignored her mother's tears and her father's skepticism to become an undefeated boxing legend, retiring at 24-0 with the same defiant spirit her father once showed. She famously said, "Every fight became a test," and she spent a decade proving she had the chin and the heart to match the name on her trunks, even when the world wanted to see her fall. Today, she is the most successful of the heirs, with a net worth of over $10 million. From her massive Los Angeles mansion to her fleet of luxury cars, she has turned the Ali name into a multi-million-dollar brand, proving that the greatest legacy isn't a belt. It's the courage to believe in your own worth when the whole world is waiting for you to fail. Finally, there is Asaad Amin, the youngest chapter, and perhaps the most unexpected final joy for a man whose body was failing him, but whose heart remained open. Adopted in 1986, Asaad was Ali's second chance to be a patient, present father during the sunset of his life. Asaad never wanted the ring. He chose the precision of baseball and the technical world of sports production, a path defined by strategy rather than brute force. He is a man who seeks the one thing his father never truly found in the roar of the crowds: total, uncomplicated peace. In 2016, he was the one who signed the death certificate, a moment of profound loneliness and finality that marked the end of the 20th century's greatest story. Today, he lives a discreet life, finally finding the quiet his father spent a lifetime fighting for. 9 children, 2 worlds. At Muhammad Ali's funeral in Louisville, these 9 heirs sat together in the front row, each carrying a different shard of the same legend, some polished and bright, others jagged and sharp. They represent the full spectrum of a man who was both a global king and a flawed human being. Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." From the mansions of LA to the social centers of Watts, each child is paying that rent in their own way, navigating a world that will never let them simply be themselves. But among the 9, one story stands out as a bridge between the past and the future. One daughter stepped into the ring and faced a challenge even the greatest never had to face: the challenge of being the daughter of the king and winning her own crown. In our next video, we go deep into the life of the undefeated queen, the Laila Ali documentary. Who carries the legacy best, the champion or the advocate? Let us know in the comments.